The coffee shop sat wedged between a vintage record store and a bookshop that smelled like old paper and optimism. It was the kind of place Portland wore like a badge. Exposed brick, Edison bulbs hanging from copper wire, and baristas who knew your drink before you ordered it twice. Mira Dalton pushed through the heavy wooden door, her heart doing that awful stuttering thing it did when she was nervous. She was 27, curvy in a way fashion magazines called brave, and her mother called temporary. With dark auburn hair that fell in waves she'd learned to stop apologizing for. Today, she wore a forest green dress that buttoned up the front, the fabric soft and forgiving, paired with a cardigan she clutched like armor. The cafe was packed. Of course it was. Saturday mornings in Portland meant every freelancer, artist, and person avoiding their apartment had claimed a corner. She spotted an empty table near the window, half hidden behind a potted fig tree that had seen better days. Perfect. She could watch the door without being too obvious about it. Her phone buzzed. A text from her roommate, Jules. If he's a creep, order the fire escape latte. I'll call you with a fake emergency. Mira smiled despite herself and set her canvas bag down. Then she sat. For exactly 2 seconds, the chair held. Then the back left leg gave way, with a sound like a gunshot, and Mira went down hard, arms flailing, dress flying up, dignity scattering like loose change across the floor. The entire cafe went silent. Not the comfortable silence of concentration, but the breathless. Everybody saw that kind of silence. Someone's fork clattered. A girl near the counter gasped. Mira stared at the ceiling, her face burning hotter than any latte, and did the only thing she could think of. She laughed. Loud. Too loud. Well, she announced to no one and everyone. That's one way to make an entrance. Should have stretched first. A few nervous chuckles rippled through the room, but most people just looked away quickly, pretending they hadn't seen. Mira scrambled to her feet, her hands shaking as she tried to right the broken chair. She wanted to disappear. She wanted to melt into the floorboards and seep into the earth. That's when she heard his voice. Excuse me, is this seat taken? She turned. The man standing beside her was tall, lean, with dark hair that looked like he'd forgotten to comb it and hadn't cared. He wore a navy Henley, sleeves pushed up to his elbows, and jeans that had seen some miles. But it was his eyes that stopped her. Calm, not pitying, not laughing, just steady. That chair, he said, nodding at the wreckage, clearly had a vendetta. I broke 3 mugs this week and a lamp my sister gave me. Still figuring out if that last one was an accident. Mira blinked. He smiled, just barely, and pulled out the chair across from her, the one that wasn't broken. But instead of sitting, he walked back toward the counter, returned a moment later with a different chair entirely, this one sturdier, darker wood, and set it down behind her. Try this one, he said simply. She stared at him, then at the chair, then back at him. And before she could stop herself, before she could shove it back down where it lived, the words came tumbling out. Look, you don't have to do this. I know how this ends. You seem nice, and I appreciate the gesture. But let's not pretend. No one's lining up to marry the fat girl, sir. The words landed between them like stones. He didn't flinch, didn't look uncomfortable or rush to contradict her. He just tilted his head slightly, considering, and then said, voice low and sure, then I guess we'll just have to prove everyone wrong, starting with getting you a chair that works. Mira froze. He gestured to the chair again, patient, like he had all the time in the world. Slowly, carefully, she sat down. The chair held, solid, steady. No creak, no wobble, no betrayal. Across from her, the man sat down in his own chair, folded his hands on the table, and said, "I'm Callum." She exhaled, longer than she meant to. Around them, the cafe returned to life. Conversations resumed, espresso machines hissed, someone laughed too loud at a bad joke. But at their little table by the dying fig tree, something had shifted. Mira looked at him, really looked, and realized he wasn't trying to fix the moment. He was just sitting in it with her. "Mira," she said finally, her voice quieter now. "My name's Mira." Callum nodded, like that was the most important thing he'd heard all day. "Nice to meet you, Mira." And, for the first time in longer than she could remember, she didn't feel like she had to make herself smaller to fit into the room. Their second date happened on a Sunday, because Mira said Sundays felt less like trying and more like existing. And Callum had agreed without question. He'd suggested a place, a cluttered, used bookstore tucked down an alley that smelled like old paper, lavender, and rebellion. Mira showed up in an oversized sweater, black jeans, and boots that made her feel taller than she was. Her hair was loose today, wild and unapologetic. She'd stopped trying to tame it somewhere between the first date and this one. Callum was already there, leaning against a shelf marked Mysteries and Mistakes, holding 2 cups of something that smelled like cinnamon and hope. "You're early," she said. "I'm nervous," he admitted, handing her a cup. "Thought caffeine might help." She grinned. "Does it?" Not even a little. They wandered through the narrow aisles, brushing shoulders, pulling out random books and reading the most ridiculous back covers they could find. She found a romance novel called Kissed by the Billionaire's Helicopter Pilot. He found a self-help book titled Confidence Through Competitive Juggling. "This," Mira said, holding up the romance novel, "is my aesthetic." "Aspirational?" Callum asked. "Delusional," she corrected. "But in a fun way." He laughed, the kind of laugh that sounded like it didn't get out much but was glad to be free. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small book, worn at the edges, pages soft from too many readings. "I brought you something," he said. "It's not a gift, more like a loan, or a recommendation, or—" "Callum," she interrupted gently. "It's fine. What is it?" He handed it to her. The cover was faded green cloth, the title barely visible, Things That Don't Fit and Why That's Perfect. She opened it. Inside, on the first page, someone had written in pencil, "For the ones who never fit the mold." Thank God! Mira's throat tightened. She flipped through the pages, poems, essays, sketches of objects that didn't belong. A square peg, a mismatched sock, a chair with 3 legs. "Why this?" she asked, her voice smaller than she intended. Callum looked at her, not through her, not past her, at her, "Because I think you've spent a long time trying to fit into spaces that were never built for you, and I wanted you to know that the problem was never you. It was the spaces." She didn't know what to say, so she just held the book, her fingers tracing the edges, and nodded. They left the bookstore and walked to a small tea shop nearby, the kind with mismatched chairs and pottery mugs that felt like they'd been loved before. They sat by the window, watching the rain start to fall in soft, lazy drops. Somewhere between her second cup of chai and his third rambling story about a disastrous work presentation, Mira said, "There's this dress." Callum looked up. "Yeah?" She twisted the ring on her thumb, a nervous habit she'd never been able to break. "I bought it 2 years ago. It's this deep red, almost burgundy, with a wrap waist and long sleeves. I saw it in a window and I had to have it. But I've never worn it. Why not? She hesitated. Then, quietly, because I told myself it was for later, for when I lost weight, for when I looked the way I thought I was supposed to look, for when I deserved to wear something that beautiful. Callum set his cup down slowly. He didn't say anything right away, and Mira braced herself for the usual responses. You're beautiful now. You should wear it. Life's too short. But instead, he asked, who told you that you had to earn beauty? She blinked. What? Who made that rule? He pressed, leaning forward slightly. That you had to look a certain way to be allowed to wear something you love? Because I'm pretty sure that's not a real rule. That's just something people made up to sell you things you don't need. Mira stared at him. Her chest felt tight, but not in the bad way, in the way that meant something was shifting, breaking open, letting light in. I don't know, she admitted. I guess I did. I made that rule for myself. Callum nodded. Then you can unmake it. They sat in silence for a moment, the rain picking up outside, drumming against the window, and Mira realized something. He wasn't trying to fix her. He was just handing her tools and stepping back. Later, as they were leaving, an older woman slipped on the wet sidewalk just ahead of them. Callum moved instantly, catching her elbow before she hit the ground, steadying her with a calm that made it look easy. You all right? He asked, crouching beside her. The woman nodded, shaken but unharmed. Callum took off his jacket and folded it into a cushion for her to sit on while they waited for her daughter to pick her up. Mira stood a few feet away, watching, and she realized this wasn't a show. This was just who he was. Steady, present, kind in the way that didn't ask for applause. And for the first time in a very long time, she thought maybe, just maybe, she didn't need to shrink herself to be worth someone's time. The text came on a Thursday afternoon. Want to see where the magic happens? Or at least where I drink too much coffee and argue with engineers. Mira smiled at her phone and typed back, Is this a tour or a warning? Both. She arrived at Callum's office an hour later, a sleek building tucked into Portland's industrial district. From the outside, it looked like every other converted warehouse. But inside, it was warm. Exposed wood beams, plants hanging from the ceiling, open desks scattered with prototypes and sketches. It felt less like a company and more like someone's very ambitious living room. Welcome to Thornwell Design, Callum said, meeting her at the entrance. He was in a gray t-shirt and jeans, his hair even messier than usual, and he looked more relaxed than she'd ever seen him. This is where you work? Mira asked, looking around. This is where I try to convince people that furniture shouldn't discriminate, he said. She raised an eyebrow. Furniture discriminates? Every day. He led her through the space, past engineers hunched over CAD programs, past a small wood shop where someone was sanding a chair leg, past a lounge area with a pile of beanbags and a dog asleep in the corner. Wait, Mira said, stopping. Is that a dog? That's Bernard, Callum said. He's our VP of Emotional Support. Bernard opened one eye, yawned, and went back to sleep. They walked into a testing room, lined with different chair prototypes. Some looked almost normal. Others looked like they'd been designed by someone who'd never seen a chair, but had heard one described over a bad phone connection. This, Callum said, gesturing to a chair in the center of the room, is what I wanted to show you. It looked simple, clean lines, modern, made of light wood and dark fabric, but there was something different about the base. Thin sensors, adjustable joints. What is it? Mira asked. A chair that listens, Callum said. It senses your weight distribution, adjusts its balance in real time, and reinforces weak points before they break. Doesn't matter your size, how you sit, how you move. It just holds you. Mira stared at it. Her throat felt tight. "Want to try?" he asked. She hesitated. The memory of the cafe chair cracking beneath her was still loud in her mind. Still sharp. Callum saw it. Without a word, he walked over and sat in the chair first. It adjusted silently, a barely perceptible shift. He stood up. "See? Safe." She exhaled a laugh. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," he said, "but I wanted you to know that I wouldn't ask you to trust something I hadn't tested first." Slowly, Mira walked over. She sat down. The chair shifted gently beneath her, accommodating her weight, cradling her without a sound. No creak, no groan, just support. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "It's just a chair," Callum said softly. "But it's also not." She looked up at him, and she understood. This wasn't about furniture. It was about being seen, about designing a world where people didn't have to shrink to fit. A young guy walked past, stopped, did a double take. "Wait, is that Callum? Are you giving someone the tour?" "Yeah," Callum said. The guy grinned. "Dude, you never bring people here. She must be special." He walked away before Mira could respond. She looked at Callum, her cheeks warm. "Sorry," Callum said. "He's not wrong, though." And just like that, sitting in a chair designed to hold the weight of the world, Mira felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt like she belonged. The invitation had arrived in a cream envelope with Callum's handwriting on the front. "Fancy thing on Saturday. Want to suffer through it with me?" Mira had laughed, then panicked, then called Jules, who'd raided her closet and emerged victorious with a midnight blue dress that shimmered like water when it moved. "It's perfect," Jules had said. "It's tight," Mira had replied. "It's perfect," Jules repeated. "And you're wearing it." Now, standing in the lobby of a downtown event space that looked like it had been designed by someone who thought mirrors were a personality, Mira tugged at the hem of her dress and tried not to feel like an imposter. The room glittered. Literally. Chandeliers, glass sculptures, women in heels so sharp they could double as weapons. Everyone looked like they knew exactly where they were supposed to be. Mira did not. Then Callum appeared at her side, and the noise dimmed just a little. He wore a dark suit, no tie, the kind of effortless elegance that came from not trying too hard. "You came," he said, and his smile was so genuine it made her chest ache. "You invited me," she replied. "Would have been rude to ghost." "True," he said. "Also, I bribed you with free food. The real reason I'm here." He offered his arm, and she took it, feeling steadier already. They moved through the crowd, Callum introducing her to people whose names she immediately forgot, finding her a glass of something sparkling that tasted expensive, whispering commentary in her ear that made her laugh when she was supposed to be networking. But she still felt the eyes. Not all of them, but enough. The glances that lingered a second too long. The once-over assessments. The quiet curiosity of people trying to figure out what she was doing there. On his arm, in that dress, a woman approached, older, polished, with the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. She looked at Callum, then at Mira, then back at Callum. "Callum," she said warmly. "So good to see you. And who's this?" "This is Mira," Callum said. "Not my date, not my girlfriend, just Mira." The woman's smile tightened. "Lovely. How do you two know each other?" "We met over broken furniture," Mira said, before she could stop herself. The woman blinked. "Long story," Callum added smoothly. Involves a chair, a cafe, and my complete lack of coordination." The woman laughed politely and moved on, but Mira saw it. The quick flick of her eyes, the assessment, the judgment. Later, they stood on the rooftop terrace. The city sprawled below them in a grid of light and shadow. Mira leaned against the railing, her champagne untouched. "You okay?" Callum asked. "Yeah," she said. Then, quieter. "Do you ever feel like you're in the wrong place?" "All the time," he admitted. "That's why I started my own company, so I could make my own place." She smiled at that. "Must be nice." "It is," he said. "But it's also lonely sometimes. Until it's not." She looked at him. He was already looking at her. "Why didn't you introduce me as your girlfriend?" she asked, the question slipping out before she could second-guess it. Callum tilted his head. "Do you want me to?" She paused. "I don't know. Maybe. I just thought—" "Mira," he interrupted gently, "I didn't call you my girlfriend because I don't want to reduce you to a label that people use to make sense of you. You're not my accessory. You're not here to make me look good. You're here because I wanted you here. Because I like who I am when I'm with you. And I don't need to explain that to anyone else." Her breath caught. He stepped closer, his hand brushing hers on the railing. "But if you want me to call you my girlfriend," he said, his voice softer now, "then I will, loudly, repeatedly, to anyone who'll listen." Mira laughed, a little breathless, a little overwhelmed, and nodded. "Yeah, I think I'd like that." Callum smiled. "Good, because I was really hoping you'd say yes." And there, on a rooftop in the middle of a city that never quite slept, with the noise of the party below and the stars barely visible above, Mira felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. She felt chosen, not in spite of who she was, but because of it. It happened 3 weeks later, on an ordinary Tuesday that had no reason to be anything other than fine. Mira had gone to Callum's apartment after work. They'd fallen into an easy rhythm by now. Takeout on the couch, bad movies they talked through, her feet in his lap while he scrolled through emails he was pretending to care about. She'd gone to the kitchen to refill her water. Callum had stepped into his office to take a call. The door was cracked, just slightly, and she hadn't meant to eavesdrop. She really hadn't. But then she heard his mother's voice, sharp and clear, through the phone speaker. "She seems nice, Callum, but you have to think about how this looks. People talk. You know they do." Mira froze, the glass cold against her palm. Callum's response was muffled, too low to hear, but his mother's voice came back, louder. "I'm not saying there's anything wrong with her. I'm just saying you have to be realistic. You have a company to run, a reputation, and she's—" The sentence didn't finish. It didn't need to. Mira set the glass down carefully, her hands trembling. She didn't wait to hear the rest. She grabbed her bag, scrawled a quick note, "Had to go, sorry," and left before Callum finished the call. Over the next week, she pulled away. Not dramatically. Not with an explanation. Just quietly. A canceled coffee date, a rescheduled dinner. Messages that got shorter, vaguer, until they stopped altogether. Callum didn't push. He didn't demand answers or guilt her into responding. Instead, he sent one text 2 days after she went silent. "I'll be here, fixing chairs. If you ever need one, you know where to find me." That night, Mira stood in her bedroom, staring at her reflection in the mirror. She'd put on the red dress, the one she'd never worn, the one she'd been saving for a version of herself that didn't exist yet. It fit perfectly. It always had. She looked at herself, really looked, and saw someone who'd been carrying a story that wasn't hers. A story that said she wasn't enough, that she had to earn love, that she was always going to be too much or not enough, never just right. No, she whispered to her reflection. You are not too much. The words cracked something open. Tears came, quiet and steady, not from sadness, but from release, from finally letting go of the voice that had been holding her hostage all this time. It wasn't Callum's mother. It wasn't the people at the gala. It wasn't even the boys from college or the casting directors who'd made her the punchline. It was her own voice, on repeat, for years. And she was so tired of listening to it. She took off the dress and hung it back up. Not because she didn't deserve it, but because tonight she needed to sit with herself, to stay, to stop running from the weight of her own existence. That small act, staying, felt like the bravest thing she'd ever done. Mira showed up at Callum's door on a Sunday morning, unannounced, her hair a mess, her hands covered in sawdust and small cuts she hadn't bothered to bandage. In her arms, wrapped clumsily in brown paper and twine, was a chair, small, handmade, clearly amateur. One leg was slightly shorter than the others, the backrest tilted just a little to the left, but it stood. Callum opened the door, surprise flickering across his face, and then something softer. I made you something, Mira said, her voice steadier than she felt. He stepped aside without a word, and she walked in, setting the chair down gently on his living room floor. It's not perfect, she said quickly. I've never built anything before. I watched like 15 YouTube videos and still messed up the measurements. It might not even hold you, but I made it. For you. Because, she trailed off, searching for the right words. Because you gave me a chair when mine broke. And I wanted to give you one back. Callum looked at the chair, then at her. He didn't ask why or how or what it meant. He just walked over, turned, and sat down. The chair creaked. It wobbled, but it held. They both laughed, the sound spilling out like relief. It works, Callum said, grinning. Barely, Mira replied, but she was smiling too, tears prickling at the edges of her eyes. When the laughter faded, Callum leaned forward, his hands resting on his knees. My mom called me, he said quietly. Mira's stomach dropped. Callum, you don't have to. I told her something, he continued, his eyes steady on hers. I told her that I'm not interested in being with someone who fits into anyone else's idea of perfect. I'm interested in being with someone who's done pretending she has to be. Mira's breath caught. She's invited you to dinner, Callum added. Next Sunday, if you want. Why? Mira asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Why would she do that? Because I told her that if she wanted to be part of my life, she needed to be part of yours too. No conditions, no compromises. Mira sank onto the couch, her hands shaking. You didn't have to do that. Yes, Callum said simply. I did. They sat in silence for a moment, the morning light filtering through the windows, casting soft shadows across the uneven chair. And then Mira laughed, not from nervousness or deflection, just from the sheer, overwhelming absurdity and beauty of it all. I can't believe you sat in that thing, she said. I can't believe you built it, Callum replied. I can't believe you're real, she whispered. He reached out, his hand covering hers. I'm real, and so are you, and that's enough. For the first time in her life, Mira believed him. The backyard was a riot of wildflowers and string lights, the kind of setup that looked effortless, but had taken 3 weeks and a small army of friends to pull off. Wooden, tables scattered across the lawn, mismatched chairs, borrowed from neighbors, and a cake that leaned just slightly to the left because the bakery had apologized profusely and given them a discount. It was perfect, in the way that imperfect things often are. Mira stood at the back of the yard, her dress a soft ivory silk that moved like water when she walked. Her hair was pinned loosely, a few curls escaping to frame her face. She wasn't nervous. She was just present, fully, completely here. At the end of the makeshift aisle, Callum stood beneath an arch covered in jasmine, looking at her like she was the only person in the world. The ceremony was short. No grand speeches, just promises, spoken slowly, like they'd been living them long before today. When it came time for vows, Callum took her hands and looked out at the small crowd. Friends, family, Bernard the dog, and then back at her. "The best things in life," he began, his voice steady, "don't fit right the first time. They're awkward, uneven, maybe even broken at the start. But they grow, they stretch, they settle, and when they find their place, nothing else could possibly take it." He paused, his eyes soft. "Mira didn't fit into my world. She made me build a better one." The crowd was silent, the kind of silence that holds something sacred. Then, applause, warm and full. Later, after cake had been cut and slightly toppled, and the sun had begun to set in shades of peach and lavender, Mira found herself back at the cafe. Not the real one, a replica Callum had built in their backyard, complete with the original broken chair, now restored and reinforced. She sat in it, running her hand along the armrest. Callum appeared beside her, still in his vest, sleeves rolled up, holding a ceramic mug. He handed it to her. She looked down. The mug was handmade, slightly lopsided, perfectly imperfect. Etched into the clay were the words, "No one marries the fat girl." "Watch me," Mira laughed, the sound thick with emotion, and took a sip. The tea was perfect. Callum sat beside her, his hand finding hers. They didn't say anything. They didn't need to. They just sat there, together, in the chair that had once broken and been made whole again, and they were home. If this story reminded you that love isn't about fitting in, but being fully seen, don't let it end here. Save it. Share it. Let someone else know they're not too much and never were, because the best things in life don't fit into neat little boxes. They break the boxes and build something better. Stay for the stories that celebrate the beautifully broken. Stay for the ones who refuse to shrink. Stay for you,